What's up, guys? Welcome back to Deck Tech for Decks. I'm your host, Caleb. If you want to support me, you can now follow me on Patreon. Not only is it the best way to help out the channel, additionally, you'll get more say in what decks I cover. Special shout out to my high contributing patrons, Newsome, you rock. Today, we're going to do something a little bit different. I'm a little bit under the weather, so I thought instead of a deck tech today, I'm just going to talk about my 5 favorite decks I've done over the past year. First of all, thank you guys for all the support. It amazes me how much the channel has blown up. You guys are amazing. But hey, it's been a year. Let's go back, look at some of the decks, and I'm going to say, hey, what's my favorite? What do I find actually works the best? What do I have most fun playing? And what's most efficient for my playstyle? I don't think I have to tell you guys, I just love winning through combat. That's one of my favorite things to do. I want to win through smashing face. So it makes perfect sense that the first thing on this list is going to be my Tarl Kamal deck. Now, I think this one's kind of unique because the whole goal of it is to use vigilance creatures, which our commander can do. We can animate our lands, making them vigilance, and then we're going to use Bloodthirster to give us those additional combat steps, and Tarl is going to give us that lifelink and also double strike. So we're not only going to get the buff from Kamahl every combat, we're additionally going to get additional combat steps with Kamahl since Bloodthirster does have double strike. So you can net up to 7 combat steps. Your Kamahl's going to trigger 7 times, and that gets pretty insane fast. All you'll need to do is animate like 1 or 2 lands. They'll be over 20 power, and we can kill our opponents. If Bloodthirster sticks in this deck, you just win. And that's honestly why I have most fun with it. We do also include some stuff like Zapindril, Xanagod, and even Mirage gets a slot here. That way we have some extra combat steps that doesn't just rely on the Bloodthirster, because Bloodthirster is a kill on sight card in this deck. Your opponents are only going to let that happen to them once before never letting it resolve again. Another thing we do have is Odric in the deck. Odric's going to be solid just to give all of our creatures vigilance. That way everybody can benefit from the extra combat steps that Bloodthirster gives us. Let's move on to the second deck. I have it written down. Very efficient today. Henzie and Amori. Guys, I have so much fun with this deck, and honestly, it's a lot more powerful than people give it credit for. What are you going to do? Remove Henzie? I'm okay with that. If you remove Amori, that's probably the correct choice, but a lot of people are just laser focused on Henzie, trying to get rid of that blitz ability, but all you have to do is wait and cast him next turn, and Amori's reducing that. In a really good hand, you can easily mana dork, land, turn 2 Henzie, turn 3 Amori, and by turn 4, you have Henzie and Amori on the battlefield, and you're ready to dump out your entire hand by turn 5, which can be insanely fast and honestly win some games by turn 6. This deck is very dependent on your strategy and the setup, which is why it's not going to see the list on one of my most powerful decks. It's just going to be on one of my favorite deck lists. I'm going to do more lists, but I'm rambling. Let's get back to the deck, right? What are some very good cards in this deck? Goreclaw is going to be amazing. It's just going to add more to the reducing of all of our creatures, which honestly is kind of the main goal of this deck. Basically, draw your hand of 7, throw all of your bombs onto the battlefield, and win with an overwhelming board out of nowhere. That's kind of why I say this deck's amazing. The threat level is kind of a secret, because your threat level is what's in your hand. Now, that can backfire on you, because if you have 5 lands in your hand, they're like, hey, watch out for that Henzie guy over there, and you're like, oh, shit. I'm not the problem, but they don't believe you. You know what I mean? Baylor has done some disgusting things in this deck. Basically, you'll be able to attack with it, deal 7 damage to somebody if they have 7 cards in their hand, then Baylor will die, deal another 7, and then you already dealt the combat damage, so you're going to deal a total of 19 damage to someone in 1 turn. It's not okay and very disgusting, especially when you start adding additional combat steps. Baylor can just flat kill somebody in this deck. Another thing that's really good in this deck is Pathbreaker Ibex. Now, usually people have a turn to answer the Pathbreaker, right? Hey, if he untaps a Pathbreaker, we're dead, guys. We need to get rid of it. In this deck, Pathbreaker has haste and costs less. It's just broken, and it has basically been another copy of Craterhoof Behemoth in this deck. I don't run Craterhoof in this deck because that kind of seems messed up, but if you did, it would be just another copy, right? Mikaeus the Unhallowed honestly has done some insane work. Giving all of our creatures Undying is amazing. They just come back bigger, and you get to keep everything on the board. Now, we do want to hardcast this guy, which is why I think Amori is the perfect companion for Henzie, because there's there's a lot of creatures in the deck you want to hard cast and a lot of them that you want to blitz out. So Mikaeus makes it to where you can blitz out everything and you just keep everything. It's amazing in the deck. Another thing we do run is Nikia, so now we just have double mana. Every creature or every card in the deck is a creature that, lands, but you know what I mean. So Nikia is just going to double up our mana and we can just enjoy that double mana. Another one that you want to hard cast and not blitz out, but there is some scenarios where you win that turn, you can just blitz her out, it doesn't matter, right? And then you've got double mana to blitz even more creatures out and kill everybody. Another one that's really done some work in this deck is Ancient Brass Dragon. Late game, we have thrown a lot of our creatures in our graveyard, so Ancient Brass Dragon is going to be solid just to start recurring all of our bombs back and take over the board. Moving on, let's talk about Omnath Locus of All. And guys, it's not a very big secret on why this is one of my favorite decks and why this makes this list. It's because I literally said, hey, I'm going to throw all of my best or most favorite cards in a deck and make sure the majority of them have 3 pips. So it's basically just all of my favorite creatures thrown into a deck, and it's one of my favorite decks. Imagine that, right? But honestly, one of my favorite cycles and one of my favorite creature types in Magic is Elementals, and the Cavalier cycle is insane. They all do some very unique things, and they're very powerful. They synergize with the graveyard, which this deck does a little bit, and they all have 3 mana pips, so they can kind of be hard to shove into decks. But in this deck, it's extremely perfect because remember, Omnath, there was some confusion when he first came out. Sometimes I think that confusion is still there, so I'll just go over it. It just cares that there's 3 mana pips. It doesn't care that there's 3 different color mana pips, which I saw some people saying, but no, it just cares that the pips are just 3 colored pips. Okay, now moving on, the Cavalier cycle, like I said, insane, so I can shove that in the deck. There is a hard elemental sub-theme. Some of the best cards in this deck are Scroll Rack. We can use Sylvan Library to set up the top of our library, and Haunted Crossroads, right? There's a big graveyard strategy in the deck, so we can take our bombs from the graveyard, put them on top of our library, get our Omnath trigger, get the mana to cast the bombs. This deck is very mid-rangey, but if you let it set up, people just die, and that's kind of where I like this deck to be. There's a lot of board wipes, a lot of control, and then once we get set up, there's nothing they can do. Some of the bombs that we're going to run in this deck is Dragon Broodmother and Coma Cosmos Serpent. These 2 cards together can just get out of hand. You just generate a huge board state for doing absolutely nothing except for casting them. Not to mention Coma can protect itself. Then we're running some broken cards like Corvold. I just love Corvold. Putting Reaver Cleaver on Corvold just feels disgusting, and that's kind of why he's in the deck. Again, probably not that efficient, but when you do the thing and you win. Another thing is Vivictus Asmati the Dire. Since we are setting up the top card of our library, we can easily just start cheating those cards into play with Vivictus instead of our commander. Or again, we'll get the mana and then we can just cheat stuff into play with Vivictus as well. Super amazing in the deck. Now this deck does go pseudo infinite, so let me briefly explain that. You'll need Yorick the Desecrated, Omnath, the Angry Omnath, and then Risen Reef. So this will basically go infinite. You throw a land onto the battlefield, you'll make an elemental, and then you're going to get double triggers off of both of those, right? So you'll get double triggers off of Risen Reef, and then the elemental will enter the battlefield, and then you'll get more triggers. So you'll basically draw a ton of cards, and as long as you can keep putting lands into play, you can keep making those angry little elementals. And then all we'll need is a haste enabler to kill everybody. Sometimes we get Maelstrom Wanderer, or Cavalier of Flames can be perfect for that, and we're just going to kill everybody on the spot. It's a very fun combo. Probably not fun for your opponents because it takes a while to resolve, but once you get there, it makes me happy. Moving on, we're going to talk about Korvold Gleeful Glutton. No, not that Korvold, this Korvold. This guy is amazing. I've been having a lot of fun with him. I think people still underestimate how powerful this card is. It looks very hard to get out, but I'm averaging like turn 3, turn 4, which is not insane for an 8-drop. We have some very impactful cards in this deck. Diamond Lion is one of them. I still see a lot of people not running this because it looks like a terrible card, but hear me out. It's going to give you effectively 5 mana towards Korvold, since it is an artifact creature and you get 3 mana, and then it fills your graveyard, which is kind of what you want in this deck. So then whenever you're attacking with Korvold, you're getting to draw more cards. And remember, Korvold has haste, so you can enjoy that very quickly and as soon as turn 2, right? If we turn 1 land, soul ring, lion diamond, we can very easily turn 2 Korvold. So kind of busted there. Then we have some more generic stuff like Gold Hound and Tinderwall. People are running these, and they should, because it's effectively 3 mana towards Korvold. I do run some like cards that kill people out of nowhere. Jessica Thrice Reborn's just a solid triple damage, so as long as Korvold has 7 power, he's killing someone. Another thing I do run in the deck is Lizard Blade. The reason I'm running Lizard Blades is it has a really cool interaction with his ability. So on the first strike damage, we're actually going to get all the counters, and then he's going to do his regular combat damage. So if you have 4 types in your graveyard, he's going to hit as a 4/4 on first strike damage, and then on his regular combat damage, he'll hit as an 8/8. Super busted, and additionally, you're drawing double the cards. It's insane in this deck. Another thing we have is just cards that outvalue our opponents. Clouth is going to be amazing for mana generation. We do run the Reaver Cleaver as well. And then again, we're running the OG Corvold just because of the amount of stuff that sacrifices itself in this deck. I went very hard into the self-sacrifice route, so half the cards in the deck just sacrifice themselves, so we don't actually have to run any sack outlets, which saves us a lot of slots, honestly. Another thing we do run is Agadeem's Awakening. That's one of the ways this deck wins, is generate a ton of mana for a massive Agadeem's Awakening. Then you're going to grab yourself a Bloodthirster, a Kamahl, Xanagos, a Zapindril. You know, you do get all of those slots because it is in descending order. So this is kind of where the Kamahl list this is where I got the idea for the Kamahl list, right? I was like, wait, if we can give everything vigilance, you just get all the combat steps, and like light bulb clicked, and I put it in this deck and then made a deck around it. So yeah, that's the win con for this deck as well, unless you just kill everybody with Korvold, which you can do very quickly once we start including stuff like Seize the Day and Morag. Getting those extra combat steps is going to be very efficient. Now, on to my last pick, Gyrus, Waker of Corpses. This is my pet deck. It will probably always be my pet deck. This guy is so laughably not laughably bad. He's very good for what he does, but he's just so balanced, right? Like, he exiles the tokens at the end of combat. You don't even get them till the end of turn, so putting extra combats in this deck doesn't even benefit him. It's kind of wild. I'm going to probably rebuild him. He's due for a rebuild. He's gotten some ton of tech recently, especially with the Master Multiplied. That's going to be amazing in this deck because we won't have to sack those tokens, so extra combat steps are now open. So I'm probably going to build a secret commander deck where the Master Multiplied is the commander, and we can do some crazy stuff with some myriad creatures. But again, this is just a value-based deck. I was like, hey man, could we turn a Jund deck into Mudratha? And the answer is no, but hey, we can kind of do some close stuff, right? With Shigeki, Ruthless Technomancer, we can use the Reaver Cleaver to generate a ton of mana. We can even use Rakdos Lord of Riots to reduce the cost of all of our creatures. That does work with our commander. There's some busted stuff if we get Rakdos Lord of Riots on the board with Terror of the Peaks. We can just start casting our commander, reducing his cost. It gets pretty insane. Another thing we have is Auric and Fauna Shaman. These are going to be amazing pieces to just chuck cards into our graveyard to ensure that we're getting exactly what we need. This is where the toolbox comes in for this commander. Then, you know, when you have Fleshbag Marauder 2 times in a turn, it's very backbreaking for your opponent. I mean, think about it. If we turn 3 Gyrus, turn 4 Fleshbag Marauder, turn 5 Fleshbag Marauder, they are set back extremely far. Another thing we are running is Korvold and the Gitrog Monster. Just some solid pieces of insane card advantage, especially when we're sacrificing a ton of stuff in this deck. Massacre Worm and Bane of Progress, it's very easy to just stick those in the graveyard and recur them consistently every turn. We are going to use Chainer, Nightmare Adept for that. This card does some insane work. Honestly, it's super underrated. Just being able to cast something from your graveyard every turn can be incredibly oppressive, especially in this deck. That's where we want to be, right? We don't want to be reanimating our key pieces that really slow our opponents down with Gyrus. We want to be reanimating our value pieces with Gyrus. That way we can get value while getting us to our other pieces that generate even more value. And then Jund is just a solid way to fit a ton of value pieces in here, and it gives us a solid win con, which is just straight up damage, which again, like I said earlier in the video, damage is my favorite way to end the game. Another thing we do have is Ancient Green Warden. This is going to double up on our landfall synergies and going to allow us to play lands from the graveyard. Again, trying to turn make a Jund Mudratha. I know it's kind of crazy, but it ended up working out pretty good. All right, guys, that's going to do it for today's video. I would like some feedback on this video. I've never done this before. It's kind of cool. Just no script, no anything, just talk to the camera. Like I said, I'm a little bit under the weather today, so that's why I really haven't been able to build decks. My brain's just not here right now, so I figured I'd just talk about my favorite decks. You know, I've seen some people talk about it. Hey, which of these decks work? Do these decks work? Do you play these decks? Yes, I play the decks. If you want to join the Discord, that's where I usually play them. I have play tested all of my decks. I am very happy with most of them. There's a few that kind of do need some tuning, but 9 times out of 10, I'm very happy with the product. They're winning turn 7, turn 8, you know, exactly where I want to be for a casual game. So, yeah, let me know what you think. I'm really looking for feedback in this video. One last thing, I would like to thank all of my patrons. You guys are amazing, as always. I hope this helped you in your deck building endeavors, and I'll see you in the next one.